kind of been raised over the last year or so, and with this fan base is extremely critical on. That is our Philadelphia Phillies, man. And we are, what's that match number again? Oh, Uno.
Yeah.
One win away from clinching not only a playoff berth, but now, thanks to an Arizona Diamondbacks loss, the number 1 wild card seed in the National League. Talk to me about this Phillies run right now, man. I had Paul Hembekides on the show yesterday, and I kind of asked him the same question to kind of compare last year's run to this year's run. Now, obviously, the Phillies hadn't been to the playoffs at this point last year in over a decade. This was brand new to us. We were just happy to get in, right? This year, after making a World Series, you add Trey Turner, you add to the pitching staff. The expectations have risen. But this team, to me, Sean, is leaps and bounds more talented than they were last year. The addition of Trey Turner and his resurgence after the standing ovation. Nick Castellanos is a different ball player. Like in the playoffs last year, you didn't want him at the plate in a high leverage situation. Now, he's a top 3 hitter for this team right now. Bryson Stott, elevated. Alec Bohm, Brandon Marsh, elevated. Compare this year's team to last year's team. Are they that much better? Are they that much more talented?
So I'll start with, I think the burden of expectation is impacting this Phillies team a ton as well. That I think because of last year's run that we saw, and it's also such a weird spot when you think about the Braves are the best team in baseball, in my opinion. The Phillies are the second best team in the National League. So by having them in the same division, that the Phillies by default are essentially shooting for that number 1 wild card slot, which they look to pretty much have locked up at this point. But that's just kind of a strange outlook to be going in as the wild card and likely the second best team in the National League.
Just to know that.
Just so I think that's a little bit sets them up in a weird place too. But as far as on the field, I do agree. I think this is a more talented team than last year. I think things are clicking, and I think the experience from last year is helpful to this Phillies team in a way that I think more so than I feel the case with the Eagles. That for them to know that we've done this before is a huge vote of confidence heading into things. And I mean, the bats have been awesome. Trey Turner has looked like the MVP candidate completely himself. One of the crazier storylines ever in sports, just the way this whole thing is going. Bryce Harper returning to form, coming back from Tommy John quicker than anyone ever, and just kind of we saw throughout the season his power start to return to himself. So it feels like things are clicking at the right time. I guess pitching's probably a greater concern for me this year than it was last year. So we'll see how that shakes out. But they still have guys like Christopher Sanchez who are pitching incredibly well, making their case why they deserve to be in the mix. So there's a lot of good arms. The guy they brought in, I'm drawing a blank on his name, the minor league guy they brought up.
Ryan Kerkering?
Yeah, Kerkering. His stuff looked absolutely filthy. So there are options there. I think as a whole that I think it's a great thing to be building off last year, and the vibe should be incredibly high, and that the bats have caught up. So I am pretty optimistic, and I do think that there is a chance that they're peaking right at the right time.
Your pitching point's interesting to me because I do agree with you. It's obviously way more of a concern than the bats are, right? But from this point last year, they definitely have more talent and more arms right now than they did at this point last year in the bullpen and in that rotation, long inning kind of guys in Christopher Sanchez, Michael Lorenzen, whatever you want to do there. But there definitely is a little bit more of I don't want to call it an unknown or a shakiness, but Aaron Nola had a great September last year, and Zach Wheeler was pitching kind of the same, both around a Cy Young level. So you had the confidence in the 1-2, and Ranger was awesome last year. So you had those three. This year you have Zach, and then you have a bunch of how's this going to look on any given night, right? So that's the fear, but they definitely have a larger stable of talent in the back end of the bullpen and with those starters, because there's situations, man, where like last year you had Zach and Aaron, and then Ranger became a closer. Zach Eflin was closing wild card games, right? Like you literally had Bailey Falter started a championship game, right? You had Noah Syndergaard out there. This year, you could throw Christopher Sanchez and Taijuan Walker in the same game to bridge that game and see how it works out. It'll be interesting to see how Topper goes about that. Before I get back to the bats, I want to talk about the fans because I have a thought here.
Okay.
I'm going to try to get down to the ballpark for at least one or two of the playoff games if they're able to make a deep run, right? Money depending, obviously. Mm-hmm. But last year was so fresh and so new because we hadn't been there, like I said, in forever. It felt like, right, man? And you had the Braves come in and you have an unknown person from another organization saying it was 3 hours of hell. Do you think that the fan base would be more juiced last year from not being there in so long, or now after having that World Series run, getting that taste of playoff baseball back in them, and now returning to that form?
I mean, last year was special with it being the first time with
Right.
having the, I guess, no real expectations for being there. But I do think that it only made everyone hungrier by having that experience last year. That I think there's a similar mentality this year as far as that
Yeah.
everyone is leaving it completely on the field in the arena when it comes to cheering, doing the thing, bringing the energy, all the stuff that comes with that. So I do think it's going to be even better this year. That I think last year was awesome. It's tough to replicate just kind of the vibe that is in
Right.
Citizens Bank Park when things are cooking more so than just about any baseball stadium ever. So I think I expect even bigger things this year to be even greater experience. But I do think like it's tough to replicate just the
100%.
feelings of last year.
And all the moments that happened at home in the
Yeah,
postseason last year,
the
right? The
bat
Reed's
spike,
bat spike,
yeah,
the game where they were down 4-0 in the top of the first against San Diego. They come back, right? Bryce's the swing of his life. Like, you're
yep,
never going to replicate that. But I do agree with you in the sense of how much of that run last year. Now, I'm not saying we didn't become believers as the journey went on, but how much of that run was just kind of shock and awe and like, wow, like we're still going, right? To now, it's almost business-like for the fans when they're going to show up at that ballpark because the expectations have risen to we're World Series contenders.
right.
So I'll be interested to see what that ballpark feels like. Back to the lineup, man. Like we said, you have the addition of Trey Turner, and literally there could be a 30 for 30 written on what the hell happened with him this season. Nick Castellanos, different man. Bryson Stott, Bryce Harper getting his power back, everything. If you had to give me one bat, one X factor that is going to elevate this team back to a World Series run, who is the difference maker for you?
For me, it's still Trey Turner. That I think that's very clearly the difference between this year and last year. That we can talk about Castellanos being a different guy. He absolutely has. Bryce Harper has returned to. He's going to be the epicenter of all of this. We know that. But Trey Turner was brought in here basically to be the difference maker for the Phillies, to be the piece that puts them over the edge. And the way that he has played lately, I kind of believe it. That I think he can be that guy. I think he's more than proven of capable of being a superstar level player, and it's cool for him to be embracing it. I think it's been a cool kind of just storyline for him to be embraced by the fans the way it is. We saw him speaking out on Fan Appreciation Night, giving his love back to the Phillies fans as well. So he was brought in here for a reason. I think he can deliver on it. And when things are clicking the right way, he is the perfect guy to complete this team. So that's what I think the difference will be this year. And I'm giving Trey Turner the love here.
I love it, man. I agree with you. Like, the Kasi thing is definitely a huge point, right? The dude's over 100 RBIs. He might hit 30 home runs by year's end with a couple games left. He's had an amazing bounce back season, right? You could argue Bryson Stott and the way that he plays the game. But Trey Turner, let's not get this twisted. Trey Turner, when right, meaning right now, Trey Turner is the best shortstop in baseball. So to have the best at his position on this team is something we have JT, right? JT's the best catcher in baseball, but that's not from a batting perspective. It might be from a batting perspective, but it's not. That doesn't. JT's bat isn't putting you over the edge, right? Bryce, for my money, when he's right, he might be the best player in the world. But right fielders, there's some talent out there, man. He might not be the best at his position. Trey Turner is the best at his position. And Trey Turner, like you said, is not only that difference maker, he's the guy. He's a World Series champion. I know it doesn't feel like that with the Nationals, but he's won a World Series in Washington. He went to the Dodgers and had, high playoff expectations to make runs out there, albeit it didn't work out. He comes here, he struggles the first half, and so many people are just talking about, if he can just be 5% better, 10% better, and be another piece. And I'm sitting here like, no, man. He's the guy, to your point. He is the guy to put this team over the edge for me because he does so many things from a hitting perspective. You're finally seeing the power over this run, which has kind of been a ridiculous stretch. I don't know if he's actually that much of a streaky power hitter, but apparently he's got it in him. The base running is a threat. The glove is a threat. Everything he does is going to be a threat come playoff time because every at bat, gets magnified, right?
Yeah.
We know that in the postseason. So to have a guy who can make contact and put the ball in the outfield and turn what could be a deep single into a double to lead off an inning is huge for me. So I wholeheartedly agree with you about Trey Turner.
And Trey also, by the way, was a guy who kind of spoke toward those moments or what drew him to Philadelphia. That the big moments with the crowd. This is why he came here as well. That he wants to be the guy in those spots. I really respect and like that about him, and I now have confidence like he can deliver when the time is right. So I think
agree.
he's excited for the moment, and I can't wait to see him on that stage.
It is crazy, man. To go back to how you brought up the standing O and the just turning of events here for him. Just think, like,
he's a different guy.
Yeah, man. And clearly it was also mental. And that's one aspect we kind of lose sight of as fans, as like strip away the uniform, strip away the paycheck. They're you and I, right?
Yeah.
And some people respond to negativity, to criticism. Bryce Harper might not respond to a standing O. Bryce Harper might like a kick in the ass to get him going, right? Trey Turner wasn't going to respond to that. And we obviously we love to take credit, and who knows, maybe it was just an outrageous coincidence. I don't buy it, man. I think you've seen different facial expressions, different body language, a happiness to this dude to play baseball again that you weren't seeing in the first half. And it's crazy what just a can do for some people, man. But a guy who I think is going to need some standing O's this playoff run to kind of get out of his own way a little bit is my man Topper, okay? Because, Sean, I swear to God, if Bryson Stott and Brandon Marsh are not in the lineup against left-handed pitching this postseason run, I'm going to rip my hair out. He's doing it at the end of the season. What do you think Topper's going to do? Because there's been moments this year where he's allowed them to hit lefties, and they've had success against it. But Rodolfo Castro gets a start the other day. Like, my man, there's about 7 games left in the season. Rodolfo Castro doesn't need to start, Rob. He doesn't need some playing time. This isn't June, okay? So tell me he's not going to sit them against left-handed pitching.
Yeah, I hope not. I'm on the same page as you as far as what I hope. I think Stott is absolutely an everyday guy that you have to find a way to get in. He's another guy I think is built for the moment and is ready for these big opportunities that I want to make sure he gets the chance to. March has been weird because I think my expectations for March when the trade initially happened last year was that he was the fix from a glove guy perspective and kind of not as good as a hitter. He hasn't lived up to what I hoped for as a glove guy, but he's been far better as a hitter. That he is a guy that I trust, that he can put the ball in play. He can start a rally. We've seen him do these things against righties or lefties. So I think the bat's been good enough to keep him in the lineup. I think guys like Johan Rojas and Patchy also make things a little more difficult for making sure that he is there on an everyday basis. And Rojas has been so tremendous since he's come up that I'm curious how much that impacts things as well. So I'll say I have more confidence that Stott's the guy that's in there from a night in and night out perspective. But I think both these guys have strong cases for why they deserve it. And I have the confidence in both. If March can find a way into the lineup on a nightly basis, I have no problem with it for sure.
It is a fair point because I do agree in terms of the outfield, whether, whatever you want to do, whether Bryce is playing first or Bohm and then Sosa, who has overachieved in the batter's box as well this year from what he was brought in to do. And whether Marsh is in left or center, you do have guys like, obviously to me, it's Rojas greater than Pache, but either guy can technically play in that spot. It's not so much that, it's the Bryson Stott thing for me. It's like this kid above all has proven he can hit left-handed hitting, and the drop off, man, the drop off from Marsh to Johan Rojas maybe isn't that great. And they're both going to do things, that benefits this team in different ways. The drop off from, let's say, Bryson Stott to Rodolfo Castro or Edmundo Sosa is drastic, man. Yeah. So that's the thing I can't have happening. The Johan Rojas, I'm praying right now that Topper, we talked about training wheels with the young players with the Eagles. I'm praying Topper doesn't put them on them. To me, you mentioned playing your best guys with the Eagles. This is what you have to do with this lineup. Forget left-handed, right-handed pitching. Bryce Harper's playing first. Kyle Schwarber's DHing for me. Brandon Marsh is in the corner. And Johan Rojas is playing center field. That is the bottom line. This kid has stones. This kid is a difference maker in the field as you pointed out with Brandon Marsh. And when you put Marsh in left over Kyle Schwarber, now you're really cooking in the outfield defensively. That's going to play, dividends for this team come NLCS, NLDS against an Atlanta Braves, against an LA Dodgers team when you need to cut off a ball in the gap to start an inning or make a big catch, whatever the case may be. I would play Johan Rojas almost every day if I was Rob Thompson.
Yeah, and especially on a team where there's a lot of defensive liabilities floating around, that makes Rojas all the more valuable for a guy that can balance that, complement that, and make up for some guys around us. And by the way, Castellanos has been far better in the field than I think any of us could have ever expected. So a little hat tip to him for the growth that he's shown in that area as well.
One last thing with the Phillies, and then I'll ask you. I don't even want to talk about them, but we'll talk about them. One last thing for the Phillies, man. Aaron Nola. Does it fix itself, Sean? Does he find a way to wipe the slate clean, turn the page, so to speak, and get things right this postseason run? You're talking about a man that turned down a paycheck from Dave Dombrowski and said, no, I'm betting on myself. We watched Aaron Judge do it last year, and he broke an AL record. And, man, it pays. Aaron Nola, the flip side to things is when you bet on yourself and you're wrong, you're going to hurt in the pockets. And right now, Aaron Nola isn't getting the deal he sought from Philadelphia nor anywhere else come end of year unless he has a monster playoff run. Do you think he can turn things around? Because he's another guy that feels like it's so much up here right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way. The Phillies have no choice but to find out if he can. That there's no other option but riding with whatever version of Aaron Nola you get. I wouldn't say I'm the most confident that he is going to completely straighten out and be the guy that we've kind of come to know him to be. The home run things has been super weird all year. I don't really understand why that's such an issue, but it very clearly is. But as far as like from Nola specifically, this is his time to prove it that he could have had an even worse season than he did this year. And if he pitches okay in the playoffs, that's all that we'll remember and all that will matter. So with all the money on the line, with plenty to prove, this is your stage to step up and prove that you are that guy, that you deserve all this. And if he does pitch like it, he will be rewarded with it. So all the expectations are on Nola. It's a lot of pressure on him. I would say just from a purely watching it and my belief in him is not as high as I would like it to be right now. But I think there's no better option than riding with it, seeing what happens. And he has every reason in the world to pitch like the best innings of his life. So it could happen. I think we're going to find out either way. I'm not as optimistic as I would like to be, but to that point, like roll the dice and we'll see what happens. At this point.
You have to. I agree with you. The upside is far greater than what anybody else in that rotation is going to give you. Ironically enough, he gets the ball tonight in a playoff clinching scenario at home against the Pittsburgh Pirates team that is not going to make the postseason. So he has to show up, man. And they have Mitch Keller on the mound. So to get that win tonight, we'll see what version of Mitch Keller shows up, but he's a solid starter in this league. So we'll see what the Phillies offense can do, but Nola's got to get right. I'm interested to see the leash that Topper has for him tonight because you're coming off of a good start from him. And Topper didn't extend him and stretch him the last start to kind of take that positive and move it forward. I'm interested to see if he can build upon that last good start, get through 5-6 strong innings, hopefully 6, 5's a little weak, but 6 strong innings here tonight, clinch, and maybe start to build that confidence heading into the postseason.